Future Series great friend and advisor, Zahir Ali. Space Talks with Z provides a forum for thought leaders to share insights and recommendations on how America and its allies can stay at the forefront of exploration, commercialization, and defense of space. Please visit our website to register to see all of Z's content and our many other programs for free at www.americas-fs.org.
Welcome, folks, to another episode of Space Talks with Z. We've got a couple of exciting guests with us here today, and we're going to be jumping into a discussion that is really of the moment. We're going to be talking about the burgeoning need for information sharing amongst industry players, specifically in the concept of cyber-physical security. With us today on Space Talks with Z, thanks America's Future Series, thanks to Will Media and other sponsors such as Comtech, we have Rabie Zahri, CEO of Positon AI. Hi, Rob.
Hey, folks. Thank you for having me.
And Erin Miller, Executive Director of the Space ISAC, which is housed in the National Center for Cybersecurity. Hi there, Erin. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Z. Good to be back.
Welcome again. Erin has an extensive career in aerospace and defense, always focused around partnerships and finding amazing ways of bringing the community together for critical purposes. In her role as Executive Director of the Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center, she's led many aspects of bringing the space community together to make them more secure and resistant to the myriad of threats that are really everywhere, domestic, foreign, etc. Rabie is a Silicon Valley executive, now CEO of Positon. He has a wide range of expertise from AI, high-performance compute, stemming from his work as an engineer, which was also his training. So, let's just jump in, folks. And Erin, let's start with a couple of hot takes that we've seen recently. One, National Science Foundation's telescopes in Hawaii. And this is a little personal because I've done work at IRTF, done work at Keck. The whole suite of them apparently got hacked. Mm-hmm. And just a few days later, the New York Times published an article, which I think I found out through your LinkedIn, about intelligence agencies warning that foreign spies are increasingly targeting U.S. space companies. It seems that the threats to the aerospace sector, and indeed all enterprises these days, are just ramping up. In this risk environment, how important is it for companies to share risk and threat information with each other, to be open about these things?
Yeah, this is obviously a critical time right now that we're seeing a number of different types of attacks, and that warning that came from our U.S. government was actually done in partnership with the Space ISAC through the space industry being able to contribute to that conversation. There's been a number of forums that have stood up that have further emphasized the importance of this topic and really brought to light our need for information sharing and even our ability to do so under the current structures. The law protects industry to share threat and vulnerability information under the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015. But the FBI, they stood up a Space Sector Critical Infrastructure Working Group. The DHS CISA team, they stood up Space Systems Critical Infrastructure Working Group. Both of these are public-private sector partnerships. Space ISAC has been involved in those since the beginning. The Space ISAC holds an analyst working group meeting every month with our membership to give them threat briefings. And just for our audience's record, because I know it's very easy to tie those two things together, because that alert about the observatories and the telescopes being targeted came within days of the other alert. They actually are not directly connected.
Fascinating.
Yeah, they're not. There's not a direct connection there, but obviously we know that we have a threat that needs to be managed against our cyber and physical systems. So the ways that we're starting to manage this threat without having space systems being designated as a critical infrastructure sector specifically are continuing. And we're seeing more and more interest all the time. The Space ISAC has over 100 members in our prospective member pipeline that are eager to join the Space ISAC, and we're onboarding them as quickly as we can to make sure that we have public-private partnership. And we also have on the public side, a lot of government, international, and domestic US getting involved in assigning analysts to sit on our watch floor. So we are addressing the threat in the best ways that we know how under the current structure and the current model for information sharing.
Fascinating. Let me jump to you, Rabie. You know, as a former enterprise executive, maybe you could share your perspective on why some companies might be reticent to jump in and share what they know about the risks that they have, you know, particularly with other players within their own industry.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, there's a number of factors that I can think of that could make certain companies reluctant to participate. I would think competitive advantage would be one major one. I would say companies may view their knowledge about risks as a source of a competitive advantage. So sharing that information could potentially give them anxiety, a little bit of anxiety about that. I think the legal and liability concerns are real as well for some of these companies. I think the misuse or, you know, there's negative consequences that could arise from that, could give them a little bit of concern about, you know, deterring them from sharing sensitive data, you know, in that area. I would also think about, from past experiences, I would say mostly trust and collaboration issues in certain industries. There's in certain industries a lack of trust among competitors. It could be challenging to establish collaborative relationship between the two, right? Between those companies. I would also say, I think lack of incentive, you know, and benefits for some of these companies may see some of these companies may see little reason to invest resources in sharing risk, you know, information. So I think overall, I think to overcome these challenges, you know, what Space ISAC, for example, what it's doing in third-party organizations can play like an intricate role in facilitating responsible risk sharing, right? So helping companies balance their concern and with benefits of collective risk management.
Just to stay with you for a second, you know, your work at HP and before in consulting to Fortune 500, it was always close to technology, and you've been in the boardroom. And so we understand that communication is critical in most contexts, but what have you seen regarding this specific type of information, you know, in that boardroom context?
Yeah. I think in that context of information exchanged about risks and you know, between players in specific industry, you know, I think effective communication is indeed critical. I think mostly what I've seen is risk management or risk mitigation. So companies within an industry often exchange information about risks to collectively identify and mitigate potential threats. You know, sharing best practices, emerging risks, lessons learned, things of that nature. Also development of, you can think of also like industry standards, like industry-wide standards and guidelines, you know, for risk assessment and management. This is almost a common use case that can enhance overall safety and stability within the sector. I can think of a million other use cases. I think supply chain resilience, cybersecurity, to name a few. Other areas of collaboration and information sharing. You know, I think you know, those things ensure, you know, supply chain resilience, continuity of business, especially you know, during global disruptions like the pandemic that we just went through. You know, share threat intelligence to protect themselves and the industry from cyber attacks. I think overall the exchange of information about risks within an industry can lead to more informed decision making, right? Improved risk management and essentially increased resilience and continuity of business. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for those thoughts. That's fascinating. Now, Erin, you know, the Space ISAC's focus is in the name, but a lot of people don't understand what sharing and analysis is, or exactly how critical it is to the risk reduction and threat elimination. You know, Rabie provided a perspective kind of from that corporate enterprise side, but could you help our audience understand better kind of how this is operationalized in particular at the Space ISAC?
Yeah, Rabie, you really highlighted a lot of good points there. Many of those things that you mentioned, we had to contemplate at the beginning of standing up Space ISAC in order to determine what would be the most effective routes to create an operational information sharing approach. And so we did create, I'm going to say, probably 5 or 6 different ways for information sharing and analysis to take place to meet the needs of different players. And it really is the difference, I think, between the day-to-day operations of defending a company and its assets and the C-suite. So your comments are very important and timely because we actually did just run a C-suite level exercise for the Space ISAC membership. And we asked them to really point the fingers at themselves and say, do you have the legal processes and the corporate level processes to be able to handle a cyber or physical incident that may take place and make that information available out to the community? We, after the fact, went ahead and briefed our government partners on what we learned from the exercise. And it was an incredibly enlightening experience, and one that I'm sure many other ISACs have gone through. I didn't even come up with this idea myself. We asked other ISACs, what do you do in this regard? And they say, well, we run exercises. We got to practice it. And so we're going to continue to do that because, of course, there are things that make it to the C-suite that do need to be addressed, even on a global scale. We've seen attacks on space systems that needed to be acknowledged publicly, globally, and that introduces a whole nother dynamic. There's also a number of things that can be addressed at a different level. The day-to-day management of a security operations center or the space operations center. These players that are involved in that activity, they have ways to get involved in the Space ISAC and our watch center through our signals and space cell, running a stand-up to look at anomalous behavior, attacks on space vehicles, different maneuvers out of the normal pattern of life, different interference that's taking place, and having conversations about whether or not it looks purposeful. Those are the day-to-day operations of the space and signal cell in the watch center. And our terrestrial and all source cell in our watch center, they're tracking the adversary and documenting TTPs and APTs and having conversations about indicators of compromise with those who are monitoring their networks across the space industry. So a lot of that doesn't require any real attribution to a company. They can be relatively silent on what is happening to them if we're doing anonymized indicator sharing. But when you give them a forum where they're having a conversation with people that they trust and know, and it becomes sort of that collective defense model, what other people might say co-opetition, where, in order for us to all do this, then we have to have a conversation about what we're seeing so that we are not holding back on what might hit the next person because we're unwilling to say it out loud that it hit us, And third parties are really good at starting that conversation. There are so many companies that are in the cybersecurity and threat management business that they bring insights and perspectives to the conversation. And now you have to look at yourself and ask, or look at your company and ask, should we be sharing more? Because, it's very, obvious that multiple companies have been hit. So it's time for us to speak up too. Things like that, they change the dynamic quite a bit. So there's a number of different forums and ways to have this conversation. And I'm just proud that we're continuing to do it and have overcome some of those barriers to information sharing.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because there's a fundamental ROI here, right? There's a return on investment of that sharing and of the effort put out. But again, as you both mentioned, the case kind of constantly has to be made to keep that enabled. And certainly, as you know, in government and military, the continuity of leadership is at kind of at a different level than at corporate, right? Things change very fast. So then I suppose you kind of at some level have to be re-educating because those leaders as they change out on a frequent basis. Rabie, our company, Positon AI, started with a focus on M&A, but the general use case of information sharing that we've discussed applies across all industries. I can wax poetic, but how excited are you to be working with the Space ISAC and jumping into this application of what we've built? Bringing people together in this amazing way and creating a platform for this information sharing to occur.
Super excited. We're absolutely excited about the opportunity to work with Space ISAC and pursue this common goal that we have in a form of a proof of concept project. Collaborating with Space ISAC could absolutely offer valuable insights, resources, expertise in the field of cybersecurity and risk management. I think this partnership would be an exciting possibility for innovation and enhanced security measures and improved industry-wide practices overall. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Erin and the team for this partnership and collaboration and pushing the innovation within this space of information sharing.
Oh, thanks. Erin, that puts me in mind as the Space ISAC evolves, and with everything that's happening in terms of the ease of use of deploying AI in different ways. How do you see your usage of AI-powered tools like Positon and others, of course, supporting the ISAC's mission and its members' success?
Yeah, thank you, Positon team. We are excited to be collaborating with you. I am one to believe in the full power of small businesses and startups and innovation. And many people have heard me say in public forums that could be, the place where we find the next game-changing technology that takes over everything, and makes us truly able to compete against the adversary. So I'm looking forward to the proof of concept, and also believe that AI is going to be a big player in the future. Already today, we're seeing that. And Space ISAC has incorporated AI into some of our other tools, as well as, I know you already have that included into Positon. But what we expect is that, especially related to cyber threat intelligence and looking at space threats, then there's so much data, there's so much information that we need to use. We need to have positive control, I'll say, over our artificial intelligence, and we need to use it to our best advantage so that we can synthesize that data and make decisions quickly, because there's a lot of work that does need to be done. There's a lot of mapping that needs to be done to be able to determine the attack surface and do risk management to that attack surface and project the future of where it's going. So AI has a critical role. Our artificial intelligence and machine learning community of interest, they created a white paper that has been released and can be made available with this presentation, talking about AI ML ops for the space industry. And they had a lot of great insights there and recommendations for the way forward.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. And we'll definitely want to make sure to disseminate that white paper to the audience, SpaceTalks with the audience. One of the things that people sometimes forget is that the speed of light is finite. And why is that relevant to cybersecurity and this conversation? Is because it drives us to use increasing amounts of automation, because you can't control things in real time as you go farther away from Earth. And so protecting that AI is clearly going to be a big deal. But having kind of thinking about the wider space economy and staying on the topic of technology at the ISAC, you are soon to host the Value of Space Summit, on October 17th and 18th in Colorado Springs. I know you already have a great lineup of talks and panels planned, but maybe you could share a little bit more, maybe a little bit of inside juice, as it were, about the event, who's going to be there, who's helping out with it, etc., for our audience.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to tout the Value of Space Summit. A little background on the Value of Space Summit. The whole reason why it exists is the Aerospace Corporation partners as a founding board member with the Space ISAC, and they wrote a paper on value of space. And we were talking about, why people would actually manage the threat and even address security for space systems is because they understand the value. And that conversation started 3 years ago. Now, today, we're having conversations about designating space systems as a critical infrastructure sector. We're really making a lot of progress to understanding what is the true value of the space system to an individual. And we use, the Air Force and the Space Force have made it very well known how much we use GPS or other GNSS.
That's right.
Which we're all connected to all the time. And that is... that's a publicly known one, but there's so many other things that we're using space systems for: our financial sector, energy grid, managing climate and water, and basically everything that you could possibly think of. All 16 critical infrastructure sectors are connected to space systems. And now in our Value of Space Summit, we're really trying to acknowledge the next phase that we're entering into. This next giant leap is what we're calling it: building cyber resilience for the global space industry. So the whole theme will explore critical importance of cybersecurity for this rapidly advancing commercial space sector. And our theme draws parallels between the monumental technology advances that propelled humanity to the moon in the 60s. And now the current state of the space industry, really profoundly moving forward. We're experiencing rapid changes as we have commercial missions to the moon. We're building infrastructure that will live in space in low Earth orbit, cislunar, geo, MEO forever. And now we've got so much junk up there. We're having space environmentalism conversations. So not to disregard the amazing economic impact of all of this, we have, a threat aspect that needs to be managed. So a lot of people see a different angle for why they would come to the Value of Space Summit, because we all have a role in this conversation. But having the conversation together and bringing the global space community together in Colorado Springs for 3 days is our summit moment, our capstone moment, where we have a summit for the Space ISAC to be able to have these important discussions. One of the big highlights this year is going to be the threat briefing that our Watch Center analysts will deliver at the summit. So this takes place during the technical track, and there's something for everyone. So if you're more into policy, then there will be policy sessions where we'll talk about things like commercial protection and how that might have to do with security threats. We'll talk more about artificial intelligence. We'll most definitely be talking about exploring cislunar, establishing infrastructure in cislunar. And we'll talk more about, why an ISAC exists for space and what the other groups that exist already before the Space ISAC, the trade associations, do in partnership with Space ISAC, or, how all of the community can come together. There's so many conferences. I know everyone is probably looking at their calendar going, how am I going to attend another conference? But I really want to emphasize that this conference is about security and risks and threats. So if you own infrastructure, or you're part of a team that manages a program and you care about the security of that infrastructure, then this conference summit is for you. There's 2 classified sessions as well. Sorry, I just want to throw that in there for those who like that portion.
Yeah, I mean, what's really amazing about this is that you've got IAC, you've got this Space Foundation's, pretty much the biggest space conference in the US, but they're very general, and that's nice, that's useful. Go for meetings, go for context. But this is a very tactical, operationalizable conference with direct value to the attendees that they can take directly back to their organizations and implement. Hell, they could implement it while they're sitting there learning it, by directing their teams to make changes. So I find that's really fascinating. Thank you, and thanks, Aerospace. It's funny. It's a horrible pun, but I have to make it. Because ISAC is literally in Steve Isakowicz's name. So I don't know if anybody's pointed that out to him. I'm going to have to do that next time I see him. But it's just natural that Aerospace is involved, and I know that Steve is passionate about not just developing space but securing it. It's critical. Now it's looking like we're getting a little bit close to time. So I want to give both of you guys, Erin, Rabie, again, thanks for joining us today. I know that our audience will really appreciate the insights you've shared. But to close out, I'd like to ask each of you kind of for 3 key takeaways from this discussion. Something, things that folks can really take with them and say, hey, I remember that, I learned that, this talk helped me with this thing. Maybe I can throw it at you first, Rabie.
Yeah, thanks for having us again, Z, and this is a great conversation. I think to make it simple, I think the number one thing is understanding that collaboration is not sharing information across risk and cybersecurity and risk management is not necessarily opposing the collaboration in any industry. So there's ways that third parties can come in and help out, and there's protocols and guidelines and guardrails also to make all of that information exchange happen. All industries from space to healthcare to commercial and government are included in this in this particular issue of helping each other out, like Erin was talking about in terms of sharing information. So no one is immune as we go into a massive data kind of driven environments and industries into the future. I think AI also is going to play intricate role in crunching massive amounts of data and helping out with information and distilling information that pertains to risk management. And I think continuing the conversation and pushing the limits on how to actually improve some of these processes and make them more intuitive and secure at the same time, I think is going to be primordial to making sure that we stay at the forefront of these threats and risks as they morph and change through time. So I would say those are the 3 main points to take away.
No, thanks. That's powerful. Especially the statement, no one is immune. I think that's a great one to lead with. Erin, last word to you.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me. I'm glad to be back. And I have to just bring up Valley of Space Summit again, because that was a big takeaway here. October 17th through 19th is your opportunity to continue this conversation about security by design and cybersecurity resilience for space systems and learning more about the space threat. Also want to recap for people that the Positon partnership that we have between Space ISAC and Positon is going to lead to something great. So we look forward to sharing more in the future about the proof of concept and how that will facilitate more information sharing. And finally, just foot stomp one more time, get educated on cybersecurity risks. There's many resources out there. Space ISAC is just one of them. If you're following the conversation, you'll see that it's global and people all over the world are taking advantage of the fact that now is the time to secure our space systems, and now's the time to learn about the threat and manage it. Thanks.
Thank you both. Appreciate those comments. We will put links and info, both the white paper that was mentioned and, of course, direct links so that you can jump on and register for the Value of Space Summit. If you've never been to Colorado, go. It's gorgeous. For no other reason than that, but there's a really good reason you need to be part of this discussion, particularly if you're an executive in really any industry, because space is like the internet. It's touching every industry. Before we had our morning cup of coffee, we probably interacted with a system that was enabled by space between 5 and 10 times. It's not something I assume. This is something that I got from a research study out of MIT published a few years ago. That's the reality of modern life. So thank you, Erin, for your intense and tenacious work, you and the entire team at the Space ISAC. Rabie, thank you for being with us here today to provide amazing context from that executive enterprise perspective, folks. And thank you to the America's Future series, Two Wheel Media, and Contech for making this possible. Take care, and we'll see you next time.